For most of human history, spring fertility was not created in spring. It was unlocked. Ancient farmers across Europe, the Middle East and East Asia relied on a specific manure layer placed months earlier, one that modern agriculture almost entirely abandoned. This layer was neither raw manure spread on top nor compost mixed into soil. It was a buffered, insulated manure band set below the surface and sealed before winter. When spring arrived, this layer released nutrients precisely when roots needed them, producing growth that appeared sudden and effortless. What looks like a miracle in historical yields was the result of careful biological timing, not luck or abundance. Raw manure was rarely used directly because ancient farmers feared nutrient loss. Historical farming texts make one point repeatedly clear. Fresh manure was dangerous to soil. It burned roots, attracted pests, and lost nitrogen rapidly. Instead, manure was aged, layered and isolated until soil life could process it safely. The forgotten manure layer was created to solve this problem. Farmers mixed animal manure with straw leaf litter, ash or soil, then allowed it to begin a slow fermentation before placement. To apply this knowledge today, manure must never be used straight from the source. You know, it's important to mix it with carbon material until it becomes dense, but not wet. Allow it to rest for several weeks until heat subsides. This, in fact, mimics the pre-layering stage described in medieval and Roman agricultural records. The manure layer was placed at a depth roots would reach in early spring. Depth was everything. This layer was placed deeper than seed level, but shallow enough for young roots to find as soil warmed. Ancient plough marks and excavation studies, interestingly, consistently show manure bands placed one handspan below the surface. This ensured nutrients were inaccessible during winter leaching, but available during the first root expansion. A practical modern application follows the same logic. So you dig a shallow trench or loosen soil at that depth. Then lay the manure mixture evenly and cover it completely with native soil. No organic material was left exposed. This sealed environment allowed microbes to work slowly through winter, while protecting nutrients from rain and snow. Winter transformed the manure layer into a controlled nutrient reserve. The cold did not stop the process. It actually refined it. Microbial activity slowed but stabilized, converting raw nitrogen into forms that resisted leaching. Fungi colonized the layer, forming networks that would later transport nutrients upward. This was not composting in the modern sense. It was cold fermentation, a process ancient farmers relied on instinctively. By spring, the manure layer no longer resembled waste. It became a dark, crumbly band, rich in microbial life. When roots reached it, nutrients were released gradually, rather than all at once. This prevented weak, fast growth and produced sturdier plants. This layered system fed plants without feeding weeds. One overlooked advantage of the manure layer was weed control. Because nutrients were buried, surface weeds gained nothing. Crops with deeper intentional root systems access the fertility first. You know, this actually explains why historical fields often appeared cleaner, even though they didn't use herbicides. Modern growers can kind of replicate this effect by simply resisting surface feeding. It's best to place fertility where crops can reach it, rather than where opportunistic plants tend to dominate. The old forgotten manure layer was really a selective feeding system, not just a broadcast one. Ancient growers, well, they adjusted their manure layers depending on the animal source and the soil type. Not all manure was, treated equally. Horse manure, which is rich in fibre, was layered on a bit thicker. On the other hand, poultry manure, being hotter and more concentrated, was diluted heavily and placed much deeper in the soil. Coastal regions, for instance, added seaweed or sand to help moderate moisture levels. Meanwhile, inland farms would add ash to stabilize soil acidity. Applying these practices today really requires careful observation. Heavy clay soils benefit from looser, straw-rich mixtures. And, sandy soils require denser blends that resist drainage. The principle remains unchanged. The manure layer must match the land, not override it. Historical accounts describe crops leaping once roots hit the manure band. This was not exaggerated language. Nutrient access coincided with warming soil, increasing daylight and microbial activation. Plants transitioned smoothly from establishment to expansion without stress. Now, you see, modern soil often forces plants into feast or famine cycles. The manure layer avoided this by acting as a timed release system designed months in advance. Why does modern soil, struggle so much without this forgotten layer? These days, fertility is often applied only when plants already show signs of deficiency. But ancient systems actually prevented deficiency altogether. The manure layer, well, it really worked because it respected time, depth and biology. It treated soil as a living system with memory, rather than just an inert medium. Recovering this method honestly does not require abandoning modern tools. What it does require is restoring a missing layer of understanding that once made agriculture resilient, predictable, and efficient. If this deep historical knowledge strengthens how you think about soil and survival, do consider subscribing to Hydrohaven for more proven techniques rooted in real history. And please share this guide with those who value systems that endure well beyond a single season.